Well, hello again everybody. As you can see, I've got a box on the bench today, and that box has got written on the side, I think that says Maxpeedingrods. Should there be an S? Should it be speeding? Not exactly sure. Maxpeedingrods. We'll go for that. Well, for those of you who are playing along at home, want to know what this is? Well, actually, it's one of these diesel stroke paraffin powered heaters that you can install in motorhomes, caravans and things like that. The one that I've got, it's model number MXR-2Y. It's 12 volt operated, and it's got an output power of 8 Chinese kilowatts. I bought this particular unit from Amazon in a Black Friday deal and actually paid around £120 for the unit itself. Well, as some of you have commented on my previous videos, it's actually been quite a long time since I've made a YouTube video. Just been really busy with work and life, and, well, found other things to do in life apart from making videos. And for those of you that keep asking what's happened to the weather station, yes, I did actually complete that project. We've got it installed, it is working quite well, and I will be making a video about that, hopefully in the near future. But for today, we're going to be looking at this diesel heater. Well, I'm sure most of you will remember that I don't really consider health and safety very high on my agenda, but I think I'm going to make a little bit of a difference this time and just give you a disclaimer. This is a heating unit, it gets hot. It runs on diesel or paraffin, which potentially can burn. And the other problem with these types of heaters is if they are incorrectly installed, you can breathe in carbon monoxide, which is of course quite deadly. So what I would say is watch this video for kind of entertainment only. And if you do decide to purchase or install one of these heating units, well, I'm afraid you're doing so at your own risk. If you're not sure how to do it, you should seek some guidance from somebody that knows. That person isn't me. Let's get on with it. You know, if you have a look on both eBay or Amazon, you'll actually see an awful lot of these types of heaters for sale. Most of them look similar. They may even come out of the same factory in China. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not particularly recommending this unit. I don't know anything about it. Before I bought this particular unit, I did actually have a look online, and this one does seem to be one of the most reputable brands, and they seem to get fairly good feedback. That's the basis on which I made my decision. So okay, it comes with a manual. Of course, it's in a number of different languages. Just having a very quick flick through it. It does look to contain some good information. There's lots of pictures and information about the installation. So that's better than the average manual that you get with a piece of equipment from China. Okay, see we've got an exploded diagram of it there. No doubt we'll need that when we need to repair it in a few weeks' time. But so far so good. Got some kind of what looks like a plastic vent. As you can see, it comes with this foam protection around it. Can't see any obvious dents or dings, so this foam seems to have done its job. Okay, first impressions out the box. I can only tell you what I see. Looks quite nice. Don't have any immediate problems with that. Looks like we've got some way of filling it up with diesel oil here. And yeah, it's got a little symbol there, which actually is an oil can. So yeah, I suppose diesel is oil, isn't it? Looks as though we've got some clips on the side so we can take the side panels off. We've got some form of temperature control here to operate the unit. Looks like we've got some power leads coming in at the back. And we've got a box of bits and pieces that I assume we're going to need these for the installation. So yeah, let's have a look inside the box. Now, because I actually really know absolutely nothing about these things, this might be a first. I may even bother to read the actual manual for this. We'll see how we get on. So it looks like we've got some corrugated tubing here. Maybe that's aluminium. Got some tubing. Let's have a taste. Yeah, tastes like stainless steel. Oh, yeah, shape of things to come. So they actually decided that I stand a good chance of cutting myself on the installation of this thing, so quite thoughtfully they've provided some gloves. I guess that's handy when you're filling the thing with diesel, because diesel really does cling to you and it absolutely stinks, doesn't it? So that's quite unusual, quite thoughtful of the manufacturer to include some gloves, so yeah, I'll give them a thumbs up for that. So I have looked at some videos online, so I do know what some of these parts are. So this thing here, apparently it's a silencer for the exhaust. So yeah, we'll have to fit that. Now I'm going to fit this outside my garage, so I'm going to drill a hole in the garage wall. So all those nasty carbon monoxide fumes and gases, I'm going to vent them to the outside world because we don't want to be breathing them in. We've got another pipe here which, looking at that, this looks like a corrugated aluminium pipe. So I guess this is some form of ducting for the hot air. Again, not exactly sure. We've got some Jubilee clips. They may even be stainless steel. I think they actually are. Yep, I don't think they're plated, I think they're stainless. 80 to 100 millimeters range. So let's have a look at our little baggie. Okay, so I know what this is. This is an air filter. So I'm guessing this must screw into the air inlet pipe. Is that the air inlet pipe? Yeah, that screws in there, something like that. I've got no doubt that without fitting this, it would only be a matter of days before a mouse decides to run up this tube and make home inside the heater, which I'm sure won't be good for the heater, or the mouse for that matter. So yeah, we'll fit that. And just another bag of Jubilee clips. Again, they do look like stainless steel. Guessing that looks about the right size for an exhaust clip maybe. And some various nuts and bolts and some self-tapping screws that look like. Don't know what that's for, we'll have to find out. And we saw the vent earlier, didn't we? So yeah, I'm sure that must go somewhere. Let's take a look inside the unit, and I'm sure we gain access by doing some clips here. So yeah, I'm going to say to pull that down, and that one, and there's some on the other side. So taking a look inside the unit, there's not actually very much to see. So we've got a large tank here which we fill with diesel fuel, because this heater actually runs on diesel, although it does actually need an electrical supply to operate, which in this case is going to be a 12 volt supply. Located just behind the fuel tank here, I can see we've got a fuel outlet here with a rubber hose on it. And that rubber hose goes into this metal device, which I know is a fuel pump. And the way that this actually controls the temperature, the way I understand it is basically it controls the speed of this pump. So if you want the heater to be really hot, we pump lots of diesel fuel into the heating unit. If you want it not so hot, this actually pump slows down and we pump less fuel into it. Now I believe one of the problems with these heaters is apparently these are a diaphragm pump, and they do kind of go click and clack like the old Morris Minors when you turn the ignition key on, and apparently that click and clack is quite noisy, and I think that noise is made worse by the fact that it's actually bolted to kind of a metal enclosure which is a bit of a sound box. But looking at the way they have mounted this, I think they've tried to minimise that noise. So rather than being directly bolted to the enclosure, this has got a large rubber strap round it. So yep, they are attempting to actually dampen down some of the noise. I can see that the quality of the connectors looks quite good. This is what I would call one of those automotive style connectors, which has actually got a positive fixing on it, so it presses on and clicks into place. So yep, no problem with that. Now it looks like some of these units, when you take that top cover off, all this just falls apart because these shelve units, for example, aren't bolted in. I can actually see that these shelve units are bolted in. And oh yeah, I just touched that, and of course, as we often get with pieces of thin folded metal, these are absolutely razor sharp, so there is no deburring on those. And actually these holes here where we've got the fuel pipe going and some electrical wiring, yes, they are also razor sharp. So I'm guessing that we really should put something around them, because I bet that the vibration of this thing running over time could actually possibly cut one of these fuel lines or cut into one of these wires, which would be problematic. So we'll put something around there. Now I've also seen some videos with people complaining about this tubing in that it's not very good. Don't know. I think what I'll do is I'm going to run it with the tubing on it. I'm going to run it as the unit has come. If I've got a problem with it, I will let you know in the future. So this large plastic thing here, this is actually the heating element, and if we were to take this out and remove the plastic cover, inside we'd see kind of a large aluminium unit, which is actually the burner unit itself. Now the interesting thing about these is you've actually got a combustion chamber, and then you've got a heat exchanger, and then you've got the cold air which flows into one side, and that gets heated up by the heat exchanger. So the actual burning fuel, if you like, it never comes in contact with the clean air supply. So a lot of people actually use these in things like caravans, or probably most famously they use them in like truck cab heaters, and they're relatively safe. Now, assuming that you've installed this unit properly and you've actually vented the exhaust gases from the combustion chamber, as I said earlier, you've got to vent them outside of the vehicle. In my case, I've got to vent them outside the garage, but these are relatively safe to operate because there is no straight through connection between what I'm going to call the combustion chamber and the clean air supply. So it can burn as disgusting and smoky as you want. That combustion has got a physical metal wall between the actual clean air circuit. So yeah, in theory these are going to be safe to operate. If I can find some pictures of what's inside these, I will put them up and maybe put some links to other people's videos. I'm not interested in stripping this down right now, I just want to see if it works. So turning the unit round, you can see there's a hole here which is like a grill shape for a fan. So what actually happens is it sucks cold air into the unit at the back. It passes over the heat exchanger, the heating element, and then it blows that hot clean air out of the front. So I think that this side here, I don't know if they're actually marked. Maybe there is some lettering on the casting here. Oh yeah, it's got an arrow pointing in, and on this side we've got an arrow pointing out. So this side is a cold side, so we've got fresh air going in there which gets mixed with fuel and burnt. This is where our diesel supply to our heater goes into the unit here. And just looking at that hose there, that is just a press fit, there's no Jubilee clip on there, but the hot exhaust gases, they come out of this hole here, and we've got to use that stainless steel tube, and we've got to actually just route that under the unit. And well, in my case it's going to come out of the back of this enclosure. I'm going to drill a hole in the garage wall, and I'm going to take all of those combustion products, I'm going to take them out to the outside world. Now, as for the clean air that has to come into the unit, now I have actually seen some people just drawing the clean air from, I don't know, inside the caravan, inside the building. But if you actually read the instructions, it tells you not to do that, because I guess this side, both the inlet and the outlet to the combustion chamber, it's possible for fumes to come out of either of these, maybe in some form of malfunction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the manufacturer's instructions, although it means drilling 2 holes in my wall. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bring the cold air that gets burnt, I'm going to bring that from outside the garage, and I'm going to exhaust the gas to the outside of my garage. Hopefully that makes sense. Coming once more to the back of the unit, we can see that we have got some power wires. And in this case, I've actually bought the 12 volt version. You can actually buy 12 and 24. I guess a lot of people have got caravans, maybe use like a 12 volt car battery or things like that. But of course, a lot of these people install these into trucks where they have 24 volt. So of course, some people will buy a 24 volt unit. I think it's actually important you buy the right voltage. Now, rather misleadingly, I think on the advert that I actually bought this on Amazon, it actually says 12 or 24. I don't think they are actually dual voltage, and there was no way to actually pick either 24 or 12 volts on the listing. So it does look that I got lucky in that I did actually get a 12 volt unit. So maybe when you order one of these, if you decide to, just make sure that you get the correct voltage. So if you're a truck driver, you're going to want 24 probably. But for me, running it from my garage, I'm going to need 12 volts. And I'm going to need that 12 volts at a relatively high current, which stays here up to 15 amps. Now, the reason that I think it needs such a high current is, for one thing, we've got a rather large electric motor here which powers the fans, but we've also got effectively what I would call a glow plug. Now, that glow plug gets red hot, so it consumes quite a lot of current to get so red hot. And then I think what probably happens is it takes the diesel, it sprays it onto that glow plug, which ignites it, and then you've got I guess a fan which feeds the furnace with lots of fresh air, so you get quite hot combustion, a bit like some form of blast furnace. And yeah, so it uses 15 amps. The advice that a lot of people have on the internet is that you really want to run these from something like a 12 volt battery, and of course if you've got a 12 volt car battery, that hasn't got any problems in delivering 15 amps, or in fact it can deliver some hundreds of amps. But I'm not going to run it from a car battery. I've actually bought a switch mode power supply, which is actually rated, I think the one I bought is rated at 20 amps, so hopefully that will be okay. But some people do still recommend that you run these from a battery. So when you switch these units off, you can't just disconnect the power. You've actually got to put them through a cooling cycle, which I guess turns off the diesel supply and actually just blows cold air through it so it cools down. Because I've heard people say that if you just disconnect the power supply, they've got some electronics in here and that electronics gets damaged. So although I plan to run it on a switch mode power supply, I might also put some form of battery backup on it, just so that if my power goes off, it does actually shut down safely rather than overheating and damaging the electronics. So I have found a little spot on the floor here next to my workbench, and that's where I actually plan on mounting this unit, but I don't think I'm going to put it on the floor like that. I think I'm going to just lift it up slightly, because we do have those pipes in the underside of the unit, and I think it will be actually easier to get those pipes out of the garage wall if I actually just lift the whole unit up. So I was going to make a little bit of a stand for it, but just putting it down on the floor there, you can see that the unit itself, it doesn't seem to take up too much room. And I'm wondering if I can actually just tuck it under my bench slightly, because that means that anything falling off my bench, any dirt or anything like that, won't actually land maybe quite on top of it. This bench is bolted to the wall because I hate a bench that moves around when you're drilling things, so unfortunately I can't move this anymore. But yeah, I'm thinking I could maybe put this on one side, but having said that, I probably do want to be able to get at the other side to get these clips out. So yeah, maybe I can't tuck it quite in the corner as much as I want to, but I definitely just want to lift it up a little bit, maybe something like that. I think that'll be high enough, just so I can get those pipes out, and maybe so I don't have to lie on my belly when I'm trying to drill the holes through the wall here. Well, just the other day at work, we were having a bit of an office clear out, and we disposed of some old tables, and once we'd stripped the tops off the tables, I found that they had this metal framework support for the legs at either side, and of course I couldn't see those useful bits of metal going in the skip, so I went in the skip after them and managed to salvage some good bits of metal there. So I think what we'll do is we're going to use this piece of metalwork here from an old table, and we're going to go ahead and build a little stand. I think rather than getting the grinder out right away, I might just see if I can cut some of these welds off, because I hate grinding unless I have to.
A few moments later.
Now when it comes to hand tapping, I'm completely rubbish at it, so there's pretty much zero chance of this actually coming through straight, but we'll give it a go. So for those playing along at home, this piece of material that I'm drilling through is mild steel, but it's what they call hot rolled steel, and it tends to have kind of a hard surface layer on it, kind of high carbon. From where it comes through the rolls and where it gets pressed, kind of gets work hardened. So although once you get into the core of this material, it drills easily, just the outside of it is actually pretty hard stuff. So of course, I want to pre-long the drill bit, so a little bit of lube goes a long way. Well, from time to time we all need a little bit of lube, and I tend to use this Molislip MWF metalworking fluid. Seems to work pretty well for everything. So this metal that I'm using, it is a thin wall box section. It looks like it's about 1.5 millimeters. Well, I'm afraid my TIG welding really isn't what it should be, having not switched this machine on in about 4 years. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to use the equivalent of the hot melt glue gun, and we're just going to use a MIG welder to spaff some metal onto these joints. Okay, 4 more of these to do. I'll bring you back when I finish that. Last job is just to glue some legs on. And I've even managed to get all the table legs on without it rocking, so that's got to be a first, hasn't it? Oh, this is no fun at all. As you can see, in an attempt to cover up my terrible welding, I've gone ahead and I've literally thrown some black paint at it. I say thrown black paint at it, it turns out that my painting is just as bad as my welding, but then again, you try spraying something when it's -3 degrees in the garage, which is what it is today. So it's damn cold. Okay, we've also made some side panels to go on my framework here. The main reason that I built these side panels is because I don't want any dirt or wood shavings or any rubbish on the garage floor to get kicked underneath the heater where it come in contact with the hot exhaust and again maybe start a fire, which wouldn't be good. So let's go ahead and bolt on some of these side panels. So as I go ahead and install these self-tapping screws, I'm just putting a little bit of grease on the end of the screw. It does just help them go in. I've also got a side panel for the right hand side, but I'm not going to install this just yet because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my power supply and I'm going to fix it to the inside of the enclosure here, because this thing does need a 12 volt power supply, and I think I might also maybe fit something like a small 12 volt battery inside, because there is some warnings with these devices that if the power fails they can actually overheat because they need to go through a cooling cycle when you switch them off. So yeah, at some point I'm going to install a battery. Not today, I just want to get it running for today, just make sure it works before we do too much work. So here is the power supply unit that I plan to install, and this has got a 12 volt at 20 amp rating. Don't know if it'll actually deliver 20 amps, it does seem quite small to be a 20 amp power supply, but these modern switch modes really are quite amazing, aren't they, in how much power they can pack. Quite impressive. Anyway, to leave a work or explode, I'm sure we'll find out shortly. So I think we want a hole to mount our power supply down here somewhere, and another one down here. I think I'm going to want a few clips to retain the cables because I don't want those cables coming into contact with the hot exhaust. Now I do have some P-clips here. I'm hoping I can find something that will be suitable. And one about there should suffice. Now, because I have actually built a metal stand with this, it's obviously conductive, so any conductive metal parts, it's important that we earth these. In theory, we should actually earth the main framework and all the panels separately. I'm not actually going to do that, but I am going to at least earth this panel that the power supply is mounted on. So I think what we'll do is we'll just make provision for putting an earthing stud somewhere about there. Time to go ahead and wire this thing up, and I'm going to use one of those old cables that comes from a computer. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cut off the IEC connector. I do always save these cables because I'm constantly playing with junk, and it is handy to have some old cables. Now this cable isn't particularly heat resistant, of course, so we'll have to try to make sure it is routed away from the exhaust, but I think it'll be okay for what we're doing here. Well, I was hoping to use some of these little fork connectors, but unfortunately I haven't got any of those. The advantage of using these fork connectors is you don't have to take the screws completely out of the power supply. You can just loosen the screws and push these in. But unfortunately I've only got this blue size, which is just a little bit too big for my cable. So unfortunately I'm going to have to use some of these round crimp lugs, but yeah, they'll be fine. Before plugging this in for the first time, I'm just going to do some very basic continuity checks. So let's make sure we've got an earth between the pin of our plug and the back plate, which we do, and also the power supply itself, which we do. Let's check for a live connection, which we do, neutral, which we do, and let's check for a short circuit between live and neutral. So all that looks good. Before plugging the power supply into the heater unit, I think we better just check that it's outputting 12 volts, which it's supposed to be, because who knows. And I've also noticed that this power supply didn't really come with any instructions, but I've just noticed that there is a switch inside it here, and that switch has a 110 volt setting and a 220 volt setting. So here in the UK we're going to want that set to the 220 side, and I can see that it is actually correctly set, but maybe you should check that if you have one of these power supplies. So let's go ahead and switch on. Well, no smoke and no explosion, so I'm going to take that as a win. Have we actually got any 12 volt output? Let's check that. Now the output for this power supply does have some slight adjustment on it, and I do actually intend to run this just above 12 volts so it could actually charge up a battery as well. But yeah, let's see what the output is. Yeah, 12.19 volts. So yeah, we're outputting 12 volts. That's good enough to start with. When you purchase these heater units, they do come with a short length of stainless steel tubing for the exhaust. It's kind of like that concertina stroke corrugated tubing. Now the edges of this are actually pretty sharp, and it's actually a little bit difficult to push this style of tubing on. Now the other thing is this tubing is only relatively short. I'm not sure what it is, maybe half a metre or so. Well, some of my walls here are quite thick. It's not like I'm installing it in a vehicle where you just got to get through the floor of the vehicle, which is millimetres thin. I've got to get through a cavity wall. So what I did was I actually purchased some different tubing here, which I think that's, I don't know, it's quite a long piece, that maybe just over a metre, but this has got ends on it which are they're smooth, they're not corrugated, which does make it just a little bit easier to slip on. So let's do that. And I've managed to install that all the way up, and it also comes with some stainless steel clips. Now quite a few people have complained about the quality of these clips. I've got to admit, I don't have a problem with these. I actually think they're quite good quality stainless clips. Okay, I think I've got that tight. Now because I happen to have some spare Jubilee clips, I think I'm going to put another one on top because yeah, absolutely don't want the exhaust to leak, because I don't want my workshop covered in carbon monoxide. So because I've got them, I'm going to put another one on as well. Okay, I think that's pretty tight, so I'm happy with that. So it just so happens that I do have some exhaust wrap that's left over from one of my previous car projects, and I think what we're going to do is we're just going to lag the exhaust, because I'm a little bit concerned that these get very hot, and it does run, I'm going to say, relatively close to the fuel line here. I don't actually think that that's going to be a problem, because the exhaust is actually going to be routed quite a long way from here, but I've got some of this to hand, so kind of why not. You can see that I'm putting some plastic cable ties on here. Don't worry, these aren't permanent. These are just to hold it temporarily while I make the wrap, because yeah, it does fight you somewhat. So I found an old reel of stainless steel, which I think probably belonged to one of my MIG welders in the past. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some of this off, see if it's possible to actually just wrap some of this wire around the exhaust wrap, because it does have a habit of just coming loose if you don't secure it. You can actually get stainless steel cable ties to wrap this with. Unfortunately, I just don't have any of them. I've spent quite a lot of time talking about the exhaust here, and how important it is that we take these exhaust gases and we vent them to the outside of the building, because any carbon monoxide which leaks into the workshop, potentially fatal, very deadly. So you've got to be quite careful when you install this exhaust system, and as I say, make sure that the pipe goes outside of your workshop where it can vent harmlessly. But equally importantly, and the thing that most people who install these heaters in a workshop get wrong, is the actual air intake. So the air intake port, you can probably see that, that's down here. Now, according to the manufacturers, the air intake port must actually come from the same place as where the exhaust port goes to. And the reason for that is because you can get a difference in pressure between the inside of a building and the outside of a building. So it's quite possible, if you actually just was drawing the air here, I could actually install this and I could put the filter on it, and a lot of people would think that's absolutely fine because no exhaust products are going to come out of the intake. Well, yeah, you'd be wrong. Because of this problem with differential pressure, you could actually get the exhaust fumes blown back down the exhaust, and they will come out of the intake. That can do a few things. One, the carbon monoxide can kill you, but secondly, what can also happen, it can actually blow the flame out within the heater, in which case the heater sprays hot diesel onto the parts of the combustion chamber, but rather than burning them, it actually just well, it creates like a smoke generator, a mist, a fuel vapour, and it fills your workshop up with white smoke, which is yeah, bad, toxic, and also quite flammable. So it's really important that you don't just vent the exhaust to the outside world, you also vent the intake to the outside world as well. And it's just amazing how many so-called experts who are showing people how to install these heaters get it totally wrong. So we've got our 25mm air intake pipe here, which we're going to plumb to the outside of my garage, and we secure this on the same way as we did the exhaust. We're going to put that onto the input here of our heater unit, so I'm going to put a Jubilee clip on. Okay, that's snugged up tightly, don't think that's going anywhere now. Now this tube is actually considerably longer than what I actually need, but the cavity wall on my workshop is quite thick because it's a stone building, so the walls are thicker than what you might expect. Although this one is too long. The reason it is so long is because you can only buy it in these pre-cut lengths. So I think this length here is just over a metre, it could be 1.5 metres, I'm not exactly sure. But what we'll have to do is, once this has been poked through the wall, we're going to have to trim the excess down a little bit. So when connecting our heater to our 12 volt switch mode power supply here, we've got to take a little bit of care just to make sure we get the plotter to connect. Now this does have a number of connections on it, so you can see that it's got 1, 2, 3 terminals here which are labelled COM, which stands for common. And it's got 3 terminals here that say V+. Well, the V+ is going to be your plus 12 volt connection. So I'm going to take my black wire, and we can actually install this to any of the commons. I think I'm going to choose to install this common connection as far away from the mains connections as I can, because just that's what I like to do. So I'm going to count 3 along. 1, 2, 3. So that should go in there like that. That's a common. And then again, any of these V+ connections here, we've got 3 of them. All of those are going to be plus 12 volts, so that goes to our red wire which says plus 12 on it. So let's go for, well, I think I'll go at the far end. Now apparently these heaters do take quite a lot of current when they start up. I think I've heard some people say that they take up to 15 amps. This particular power supply that I'm using, it's what they call a switch mode type power supply. The main reason I bought it is because it was cheap and it has a high current output. And in theory this particular model says it's got a 20 amp output, and these heaters do take a surprising amount of current. You've obviously got a big fan in here which is a blower which blows the air, and that takes some current, but what takes I think most of the current is when this heater starts up. It has what they call a glow plug, and the purpose of that glow plug is actually to heat up the diesel and actually vaporise it and catch it on fire. And that glow plug is just like it's like a bulb filament, an old-fashioned lamp, and that gets absolutely red hot and it consumes quite a lot of current. So I've heard that some of these heaters do take as much as 15 amps, so I've ordered a power supply which was 20 amps. Hopefully that's going to have enough capacity. Well, me and this cable have just had a little bit of a fight trying to get it coiled up, but hopefully that should be okay. Just need to check it now to see if it is going to be near to that exhaust pipe. I think it should be okay. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see inside here. Well, I'm not really terribly happy with the way that I've got this cable in. I think if something went wrong, there is an offset chance it could come in contact with this hot exhaust. So what I'm going to do is, off camera, I'm just going to rearrange this, try and improve it, because I'm not happy with it. So I've gone ahead and I've tidied up all that cabling. So all the cable that I was trying to tuck inside the bottom compartment here, I've actually coiled it up and cable tied it to the back cabinet of the heater. And I've also rerouted the actual mains cable so it comes out of this hole, which again just stops it from dropping down onto this exhaust. Now this exhaust wrap, it's pretty good stuff and I have wrapped it well, so I actually think the internal temperature within this enclosure here, I think it's going to stay relatively cool. But one thing about using exhaust wrap and stuff like this, I don't know if you've ever used this type of exhaust wrap on things like sports cars. I've done several times, and one thing you've got to bear in mind, if you wrap this part of the exhaust, it will stop the heat coming out, but all that actually means is this part of the pipe here, the part that isn't wrapped, will get even hotter. So all you're actually doing is shifting the heat away. Well, in this case I think I'm going to be shifting the heat into the bit of the pipe here that goes through my stone wall, and I'm kind of hoping that isn't going to cause a problem. Not sure, but for the first few runs, of course, we're going to keep an eye on that. And this is actually the air intake which sits above the actual exhaust pipe, but again I think this temperature wrap, and it is separated within the wall cavity by about that much, and it is also an aluminium pipe. I don't think the heat's going to be a problem, but of course the only way to find out is actually to run it, monitor it and see what happens. Okay, so it actually looks like the thickness of my wall is actually only about a foot. The actual main house that I live in is actually a really old house, and it's got very thick stone walls, where this is a more modern garage that's got kind of fake stone, and actually the cavity isn't as wide as I thought, so yeah, it's only about a foot or 30 centimetres. So in theory I could actually cut this stainless exhaust tubing off here somewhere, but I don't really think I gain much by cutting it down. I might as well actually just push the extent out the wall, and then I can divert the exhaust gases a little bit further away from the workshop, so maybe that's what we'll do. Well, I'm hoping that you can see down there that I fed the exhaust and the air intake for my heater through the cavity wall in my workshop to the outside world, Now I believe that these heaters can actually be quite noisy in operation, but one of the things that helps quiet them down is to install a muffler or a silencer on the exhaust system, and this is the one that comes with the device. Now this is more of a note to self in that these mufflers do have a little drain hole, and that needs to go on the bottom when you install it, so I must remember to fit it with this drain hole facing downwards. I think for the first test I don't want to fill the tank up completely, just in case it ends up all over my feet. So not only have I done my best to actually install this heater properly, I've gone ahead and I've purchased this carbon monoxide alarm. So whenever I'm going to operate the heater, I'm going to be using it in conjunction with this carbon monoxide alarm. Hopefully that's going to help keep me safe, just in case there is a problem. Before starting up the heater, let's just take a quick measurement of the temperature inside my garage. Now according to my thermocouple meter, it's about 5.3 degrees at the moment. Before I can start up our heater, we need to prime it. We need to move that fuel through the fuel pump, down the fuel hose and into the heater itself before it will start up. And just reading through the manual, there's a little bit of a manual procedure that we have to do. So according to the manual, I have to hold this down button for, it says 7 seconds. I wait for the display to show 300 and then release the down button. So let's try that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I can hear the fuel pump pulsing, and it does indeed look as though some fuel is coming out of the pump, although there does seem to be quite a lot of bubbles in it. And I can see that it's actually counting down from 300, so I guess I just leave it to do its business. In theory, I think all I have to do is switch it on and it should do its stuff, so yeah, I guess we switch it on. Well, the fuel pump's started up now, so yeah, something must be happening. Still cold at the moment, but the fan speed is increasing. Now just for my first test, I've actually got the garage doors open because I did expect it maybe to burn off some oil or something maybe on the exhaust. So we'll see if that occurs. Like I say, I can definitely smell combustion as though something is getting rather hot somewhere. But I'm guessing that's normal when you switch on a heater for the first time. So the air coming from this is definitely warm now. And it does sound as though we've got a small jet engine starting up in my workshop. I wonder how hot my exhaust is. Okay, so that is hot, but I can put my fingers on it. So I think the exhaust wrap's probably doing its job. Well, as you can see at the moment, there's quite a lot of water vapour coming out of our exhaust, and there is quite a strong smell of diesel. So I don't think it's fully combusting at the moment. There's still a lot of neat fuel in there, but maybe that's partly due to all the priming that we did. So I'd say the air coming out of my heater is warm rather than hot at the moment, but I think it is continuing to heat up, so let's give it a bit more time. Okay, I think my heater's probably been on about 5 minutes now, maybe slightly more. Unfortunately, I haven't set the clock on the heater, and it's actually showing 12:15 at the moment, so maybe we'll use 12:15 as our starting point, plus or minus 5 minutes. So the temperature of the air coming out of our heater at the moment, it's approximately 46 degrees, and it is increasing slowly. So I think we'll close the garage door now, and we'll leave it running for half an hour, and actually see what we can get the temperature up to in here. So this has been running for about 20 minutes now, and you can see that the smoke hasn't cleared yet. I think most of what's coming out of here is just water vapour. It's certainly very wet, but there's still quite a strong smell of diesel, and to me it does smell like one of those diesel engines that's running with weeping injectors. So I don't think that this is burning particularly efficiently at the moment, unfortunately. I suspect that the heater's just not really getting hot enough. So we've had this heater running for just over 40 minutes now. Now the temperature outside my workshop is now 4.5 degrees. Let's see what it is inside the workshop. Okay, it's now 9.9 degrees. So I guess the temperature has doubled, but I have to say, terribly disappointed with this heater. So putting my hand in front of it, it's definitely blowing warm air. I wouldn't call it hot air. Now the output from this heater is meant to be 8 kilowatt. Now as an engineer, I wouldn't say that I've got a calibrated hand, but I know, for example, what a 3-bar electric fire feels like and how much heat that gives out in terms of kilowatts. Now my opinion is this claims to be 8. I don't even believe it's giving out 2 kilowatts. So maybe the rest of those kilowatts are just going straight out the exhaust. So I've just measured my garage. It's 5.5 metres long by 5.3 metres wide, and I've actually got the roof of it boarded out, so it's got an effective height of about 2.6 metres. So in total the volume of my workshop is about 75.8 metres cube. Now in fairness, I'm sure that 75.8, that's considerably bigger than, for example, the cab of a truck or the inside of a campervan. And of course a campervan is also going to be far better sealed with door seals than my leaky old workshop. Now a lot of people also complain that these heaters are very noisy. I've got to say that for me that hasn't been a particular problem. Maybe I'm going a bit deaf in my old age. Certainly you can hear the ticking of the pump, but you know, compared with running a lathe or a milling machine, I don't find it particularly annoying, the ticking of the pump. And also the air blower itself is, well, that's comparable with a fan heater or, you know, some other type of heater, so I don't think that's a problem, so I guess that's a plus. Now not only is my double garage quite large, I've actually got some really big gaps at the top and the bottom of these double garage doors that I've got, so of course maybe a lot of the warm air is actually leaking out rather than being recirculated, because of course this heater is actually designed to recirculate warm air. At the moment I don't think it's actually getting the air warm enough to a point where it can recirculate warm air. Maybe I've just got too many leaks and this garage is actually just too big to heat with a heater of this size. Well, I've had our Maxpeedingrods heater running for about 1 hour 40 minutes now, and I'm sorry to say that it's only managed to increase the temperature in my workshop by about 3 degrees. So today the outside temperature is about 4.2 and the inside temperature is about 7.5. I really consider that to be really quite poor. I think what the problem might be is the volume of this garage might just be too big for it. So what's actually happening is this actual heating element, it's really not getting hot enough to really properly burn that diesel internally. So I don't think it's working it anywhere near its rated capacity. I think what I might do is I'm going to drop an email to the manufacturer, see if I can get some advice on them, and we may also see if it's possible to maybe insulate this garage a little bit more, because certainly there is some gaps in the door. But I have to say I'm really quite disappointed with this unit. There is some plus. I think it's quite a good kit. I think it's put together quite well, don't have any problems with that, but my usage case, well, yeah, just doesn't work for me. Certainly doesn't really lift the temperature to what I would call comfortable. So I think the last thing to do is actually to turn it off. Now I believe that they do have a shutdown cycle, because it is important to let this thing cool down properly, but all we're going to do is, I think we just turn it off, so I'm going to do that. Oh, I actually spoke to him again, it's turning off now, and I guess we've just got to leave it now until it switches off properly and cools down. But for me, until next time, that'll do. Bye for now.